Picture this: a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos, where civilizations older than stars whisper prophecies carved into the fabric of time itself. For centuries, alien empires have clung to the promise of a savior, a being destined to bring unity to their fractured worlds. But when the moment of revelation arrives, the cosmos is left reeling. The chosen one isn't a towering warlord from the crystalline cities of Zenthar, or a mystic sage from the floating temples of Valoria. No, the prophecy points to a human, a Terran, a species once dismissed as primitive, scattered across a single blue planet on the outer rim of nowhere. This isn't just a twist of fate, it's a cosmic detonation. The very idea sends shockwaves through the interstellar courts, where diplomats and warlords alike scramble to make sense of the impossible. How could a race so young, so seemingly insignificant, hold the key to salvation? The answer lies buried in secrets older than humanity itself, in ancient encounters hidden in Earth's forgotten histories, and in the quiet, unshakable resilience of a species that refused to kneel even when the universe demanded it. What unfolds is more than a clash of empires or a battle for destiny. This is a story about defiance, about the moment the galaxy's rulers realize they've underestimated Terra and its people. And as the first whispers of war echo across the stars, one question burns brighter than all others: will humanity rise to fulfill its role as the savior the prophecies foretold? Or will the weight of cosmic expectation crush them before they even begin? The truth is waiting, hidden in the shadows of 1,000 worlds, and today we're uncovering every piece of it. Strap in, this is where the legend begins. The air inside the Zorathian temple hums with tension as the high priest's words hang in the silence, sharp as a blade. Around him, the council of seers, faces hidden beneath ornate masks of living metal, stare at the holographic projections flickering in the chamber's center. The images shimmer with scenes of war, of crumbling empires, and at the heart of it all, a figure unlike any they've seen before. No radiant scales, no crest of bioluminescent tendrils, just smooth, pale skin and eyes that burn with something the oracles can't quantify. One of the younger seers steps forward, voice trembling. The archives hold nothing of this species. Their homeworld is a speck in the uncharted fringe, barely noted in our star maps. Murmurs ripple through the assembly. For a civilization that has spent millennia cataloging every known race, this oversight is unthinkable. Yet here stands the answer to their oldest prophecy, not in the form of a celestial titan or a god-king from the core worlds, but a being of flesh and bone from a world called Earth. The high priest raises a trembling hand, silencing the room. The oracles do not lie, he intones. Every cycle, the visions grow clearer. The threads of fate converge upon this. Terran, the word tastes foreign, almost bitter on his tongue. But why them? What power could they possibly wield that we do not? That question lingers like a storm on the horizon. The Zorathians pride themselves on mastery of gravity and light, on cities that float between dimensions. Yet their prophecies speak of a savior whose strength lies not in technology, but in something far more unpredictable: the human spirit. Unyielding, adaptable, relentless, a species that has clawed its way from caves to the stars in mere millennia, surviving catastrophes that would have shattered older, wiser races. And perhaps that's the revelation that chills them most. The universe has always measured worth in eons, in the weight of legacy, but humanity defies that calculus. They don't just endure, they rebel, they fracture, they fight, and yet, when the hour demands it, they unite with a ferocity that rewrites destiny. The high priest doesn't know it yet, but his people's salvation doesn't come from the heavens. It comes from the one place they never thought to look up. Dust swirls through the cracked neon signs of Portside 9, a nowhere outpost on the rim of human space where the air smells like engine grease and bad decisions. Kael Mercer leans against the bar, his scarred fingers tracing the rim of a glass filled with something that's not quite whiskey. The war's been over for 3 years, but the battlefield never left him. Not the way his hands still twitch when a door slams too loud, not the way he counts exits automatically like breathing. Tonight's just another night in another rundown colony until it isn't. The fight starts the way they always do. Some local spacer with more ego than sense mistakes Kael's silence for weakness, throws the first punch, and learns too late that retired soldiers don't unlearn how to break bones. What doesn't start like usual is the way the bar's flickering lights suddenly strobe, the way the music dies mid-beat as the air itself seems to shudder. Then the door explodes inward, not metaphorically. Wood splinters, metal groans, and in strides something out of a fever dream, taller than any human, clad in iridescent robes that shift like liquid starlight. The alien's presence sends patrons scrambling. Its face is a smooth, featureless oval save for twin pits of darkness where eyes should be. Kael's already reaching for the knife in his boot when the creature does the impossible. It kneels. The movement is fluid, reverent, and utterly wrong. When it speaks, its voice resonates inside Kael's skull, bypassing his ears entirely. Kael Mercer of Terra, it intones, each syllable weighted with something like awe. The threads of fate converge upon you. The stars have called your name. Will you answer? For a heartbeat, the bar is so silent Kael can hear the drip of a ruptured coolant pipe outside. Then chaos erupts, spacers fumble for weapons, the bartender ducks behind the counter, and Kael just stares. The war taught him to expect ambushes, not prophecies. "You've got the wrong guy," he growls, wiping blood from his split lip. "I'm nobody's savior." The alien doesn't move. "You are the one foretold," it insists. The Shaper of Dawns, the unbroken chain, its head tilts and Kael swears those hollow eyes see straight through him. You do not believe this too was written. What happens next isn't a choice, it's instinct. When the bounty hunters burst in behind the envoy, plasma rifles humming, Kael's body moves before his mind catches up. He flips the table, shoves a civilian out of the line of fire, and snatches the shotgun from behind the bar. The first shot kicks like a mule, but the second alien, this one armored in chitinous black plating, goes down hard. In the smoking aftermath, with the envoy's robes now splattered in neon blue alien blood, Kael realizes two things. One, he's just been drafted into a cosmic war he doesn't understand, and two, the damn thing is smiling at him. Or at least he thinks it's a smile. The way its featureless face warps makes his skin crawl. "You will come," it says, not a question anymore. Kael racks the shotgun slide. "Yeah, and what if I say no?" The envoy gestures to the bodies on the floor. Then they were only the first. Outside, the sky is on fire. Something massive and jagged, like a knife blade carved from a dying star, hovers over the colony. Kael Mercer, who swore he'd never fight again, exhales through his teeth. Somewhere in the cosmos, destiny just punched his ticket, and the terrible part. He's always been bad at walking away. The transition is anything but gentle. One moment, Kael's boots are planted on the grimy floor of a backwater bar. The next, his stomach lurches as reality itself seems to twist, folding him through dimensions like paper crumpled in a fist. When his vision clears, the air is thick with the scent of ozone and something floral, almost cloying. The sky above isn't sky at all, it's a swirling dome of liquid gold, pulsing like a heartbeat, casting eerie light over the obsidian spires of the Zorathian capital. A voice, smooth and resonant, echoes from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Kael Mercer of Terra, you stand at the threshold of the Chamber of Echoes. To prove your worth as the foretold, you must navigate its trials, survive, and the path to your destiny opens. Fail, and your bones will join the others." The words hang in the air, heavy with finality. The chamber isn't a room, it's a living thing. Walls shift like living ink, rearranging themselves with a whisper, corridors stretching and collapsing like a thing breathing. Kael's combat instincts scream at him to move, to find cover, but there's none. Just the maze and the whispers, Voices not his own slither into his mind, fragments of languages he's never heard yet somehow understands. "Turn back," one hisses. "You are not wanted here," rasps another. Then the floor vanishes beneath him. Kael barely catches the edge, fingers scraping against slick stone as he dangles over a chasm filled not with darkness but with swirling, hungry light. He hauls himself up, muscles burning, only for the wall behind him to explode outward, a cascade of razor-sharp crystal shards aimed at his spine. He rolls, feels the sting as one grazes his shoulder, hot blood trickling down his arm. The maze isn't just testing him, it's hunting him, and then the real game begins. Every step triggers another nightmare, gravity reversing mid-stride, illusions of fallen comrades begging for help, corridors that loop back on themselves no matter which way he turns. The Zorathians call this a trial, but Kael's been in enough hellholes to recognize a gauntlet when he sees one. This isn't about worth, it's about breaking him. Yet for all their cosmic grandeur, the Zorathians made one mistake. They assumed a human would fight their maze like they would, with logic, with reverence for the rules. Kael does neither. When the path ahead splits into 3 identical arches, he doesn't hesitate. He punches the nearest wall. The obsidian cracks like glass, revealing a hidden channel beneath, a shortcut or a trap. Doesn't matter, he's already jumping. The chamber doesn't like being cheated. The temperature plummets, the walls sprouting jagged ice as the whispers rise to a deafening roar. Then, just as suddenly silence, Kael stumbles into a circular vault, his breath fogging in the frigid air. At its center, a pedestal holds a single, pulsating orb. The exit, a trick. He reaches for it. A hand clamps onto his wrist. The figure materializes from the shadows, hooded, their features obscured save for a glimpse of metallic skin. "Not all wish to see you succeed," they murmur, voice like grating steel. Before Kael can react, the orb flares blinding white, and the figure vanishes, leaving behind only the echo of their warning and the sudden, gut-churning certainty that his trials have only just begun. The chamber of echoes fades like a bad dream, but what replaces it is no less surreal, a vast amphitheater carved from crystalline stone, bathed in the pale glow of 3 moons hanging suspended in a violet sky. Rows upon rows of figures fill the tiers, some robed, some armored, all staring down at Kael with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. At the center, a circular platform hums with energy, its surface etched with glowing sigils that twist and writhe like living things. This is the heart of galactic power, the seat of the Celestian Accord, where empires older than Earth itself decide the fate of civilizations. And right now, every eye is locked on one battered, blood-stained human. A towering figure clad in segmented carapace armor slams a fist onto the armrest of his floating throne. This is an insult. The Vexar ambassador's voice is a guttural rasp, his multi-jointed fingers curling into fists. "A Terran cannot lead us. They are children stumbling in the dark, barely worthy of standing in this chamber, let alone commanding it." Murmurs ripple through the assembly, some nodding, others bristling. Kael doesn't flinch, but his knuckles whiten around the grip of his stolen plasma pistol. He's been in enough war zones to recognize a challenge when he hears one. Then, a new voice cuts through the tension, soft, melodic, but carrying undeniable weight. The Ilthari scholar rises, her iridescent robe shimmering like oil on water. "The prophecies do not lie, Ambassador." Her triple pupilled eyes fix on Kael with unsettling intensity. For cycles beyond counting, the archive spoke of a being who would rise from obscurity to unite the fractured stars. Why does the truth frighten you so? The Vexar snarls, mandibles flexing. "Superstition, the Terrans are a blight. Their history is written in blood and rebellion. How can we trust a species that wages war upon itself?" Kael barks a laugh before he can stop himself. "Yeah, and how many of you in this room haven't done the same?" The question hangs sharp as a blade. He gestures to the scars littering the chamber's walls, the remnants of ancient conflicts etched into the very architecture. You talk about unity, but your empires are built on bones. At least we're honest about ours. Silence. Then, a ripple of something like grudging respect from the lesser delegates, but the Vexar isn't done. Words are wind, he sneers. Prove your worth, Terran. The Accord demands a trial by essence. Let the sacred flames judge if your soul bears the mark of the foretold. A hush falls. Even the Ilthari scholar hesitates. The trial by essence isn't just a test, it's a death sentence for the unworthy. The flames don't burn flesh, they consume deception, leaving only the raw truth of a being's nature. Few survive the ordeal intact. Kael meets the Vexar's glare and smiles, slow and sharp. Lead the way. The platform beneath him shudders, spiraling open to reveal a pit of swirling blue fire. Heat licks at his skin, not scorching but probing, like 1,000 needles piercing his veins. The flames whisper in tongues he shouldn't understand, yet does questions, accusations, fragments of lives he's taken, choices he's regretted. And then the fire shows him something else, a memory buried so deep even he'd forgotten it. A battlefield under a red sky, a child's hand clutching his, the weight of a promise made in the ashes. You don't have to be a weapon forever, the ghost of his younger self murmurs. The chamber watches breathless as the flames suddenly still, not receding. Not consuming, cradling, the Ilthari scholar exhales, awed. The fire does not burn him, it recognizes him. The Vexar ambassador staggers back, his carapace rattling in disbelief. But Kael isn't looking at him. He's staring at his own hands, wreathed in cerulean light, and the terrible, thrilling realization settling in his chest. The galaxy's savior isn't some mythic hero. It's a broken soldier who never learned how to stop fighting. The jump drive sputters like a dying heartbeat, and that's Kael's first warning. 1 second, the void outside his ship's viewport is a seamless black. The next, it fractures into jagged streaks of violet lightning. The alarms don't even have time to scream before the autopilot yanks the vessel out of FTL with a gut-wrenching lurch, tossing Kael against the console hard enough to crack a rib. Emergency lights bathe the cockpit in blood red as damage reports flood the screen. Fuel lines severed, nav systems fried, life support clinging to single-digit reserves. Someone didn't want him reaching the Accord summit. Someone rigged his ship to die in the nothing between stars. The derelict station looms through the fractured viewscreen, its skeletal frame silhouetted against a nebulous corpse light. No transponder signals, no energy signatures, just a tomb of twisted metal orbiting a dead star. Kael's landing is less a touchdown and more a controlled crash, the hull shrieking as it gouges trenches into the station's crumbling docking bay. The second his boots hit the grated floor, the ambush begins. Plasma fire sears past his ear before he's taken 3 steps. Kael dives behind a gutted cargo loader, his pistol already humming to life in his grip. The mercenaries aren't hiding their allegiance. Their armor bears the jagged insignia of the Vexar conglomerate, but their tactics are too sloppy for Imperial special ops. Contract killers, then, desperate ones. He counts 6 muzzle flashes in the shadows, maybe more. What follows isn't a battle, it's a butchering. Kael moves like a ghost, using the station's corpse as his ally. He flips a breaker, plunging the bay into darkness, then picks them off one by one with shots timed to the flicker of failing emergency lights. The third mercenary chokes out a wet curse as Kael's blade finds his jugular. The fourth doesn't even see the grenade roll between her boots. By the time he reaches the last one, the man's already bleeding out from a gut wound, his weapon discarded. Kael drags him upright by the collar. Who sent you? The mercenary's laugh bubbles with blood. Smart money said you'd die in the jump. His grip tightens on Kael's wrist, not to fight but to cling. Didn't matter which faction paid us, they all want the same thing, to keep the savior from reaching the summit. His breath hitches, eyes glazing. You really think the Accord will let a Terran unite them? They'd rather burn the galaxy than kneel to you. The body slumps. Kael stares at the dead man's face, then at the station around him, the eerie silence, the distant groan of buckling metal. The ambush was never the real threat. It was a distraction, a way to strand him light years from the Accord's halls while the true knives slide between ribs in his absence. Somewhere in the void, a clock is ticking, and Kael's just realized he's not the only one who heard the prophecy. The station's core hums with the kind of silence that comes before a storm, low, vibrating, thick with the promise of something waiting to break. Kael picks his way through the wreckage of what might have been a research lab once, his boots kicking up flakes of rust and shattered glass. The mercenaries are dead, but their ship's systems still cough out intermittent power to a lone terminal in the corner, its screen flickering like a dying pulse. He doesn't expect to find anything useful. That's why it hits him like a plasma round when the machine suddenly flares to life, its interface unlocking not to a command code, but to the heat signature of his palm. The files spill across the screen in a flood of glyphs he shouldn't recognize, yet somehow does. Ancient Zorathian, Galactic Common, Terran Binary. They're spliced together chaotically, as if someone tried to erase them but couldn't quite finish the job. Then the hologram erupts from the console, so sudden Kael nearly shoots at a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure in a frayed lab coat, their features blurred at the edges like a face seen through smoke. They altered the records. The scientist's voice crackles, centuries old, fraying at the seams. The prophecies were never about unity, they were about control. The holo flickers, showing fragments of something worse, massive databanks being purged, seers disappearing into unmarked ships, entire star systems scrubbed from archives. The Accord couldn't risk a true savior rising from the outer rim, so they rewrote history, buried the truth under layers of myth. You were never meant to be found, Kael Mercer. A new file unlocks. This one isn't text, it's a star map old beyond reckoning, with a single world circled in pulsing red. Earth, but not the Earth Kael knows. This one is labeled with a name that curdles his blood. Terran Prime, origin site, subject 0. The hologram convulses, static eating at its edges. They fear what they created, it rasps. The first humans weren't born. They were built, then the final blow, a security feed dated just hours ago. The Celestian summit under siege, its halls choked with smoke, bodies in regal robes strewn across the marble like discarded puppets. And at the center of it all, the Vexar ambassador, his mandibles dripping ichor as he addresses a sea of raised weapons. The Terran dies tonight, he snarls. And the galaxy will thank us for it. The terminal dies with a hiss, plunging the room back into darkness. Kael's grip on the pistol is the only thing keeping him grounded. Every piece of this cosmic puzzle was a lie. The prophecies, the trials, the fire that supposedly chose him. But one truth remains, sharper than any blade. If the Accord wanted a war, they'd just given there would be Savior the perfect reason to bring one. The first explosion rocks the temple complex before dawn. It's not the clean detonation of plasma charges. This is something cruder, angrier, like the thunder of primitive chemical explosives. Kael's on his feet before the echoes fade, the disruptor pistol materializing in his grip as the chamber doors burst inward, the figures pouring through aren't Zorathian elite. Their armors mismatched, scavenged, their weapons jewelry rigged monstrosities of alien tech and brute force engineering. Rebels, and their fury isn't aimed at Kael, not yet. A priest crumples with a gurgle as a serrated blade finds his throat. The lead assailant, tall, their carapace exoskeleton cracked and patched with welded scrap, kicks the body aside with a snarl. Lies, they hiss, voice distorted through a broken vocoder. All of it, their multi-lensed eyes lock onto Kael, radiating pure, undiluted hate. You think we don't see the game? The Accord plants a Terran puppet to keep us fighting among ourselves while the real enemy gathers beyond the rim. Kael barely sidesteps the machete swing aimed for his ribs. The rebels fight like cornered animals, all desperation and teeth, but there's method here too. They're not here to debate theology, they're erasing witnesses. Scrolls burn in sanctified braziers, data crystals shatter under boot heels. Whatever truth the priesthood guarded, these dissidents want it buried. The rebel leader backhands a younger acolyte against the wall, pressing a scorched blade to their throat. Tell us where the Eclipse protocols are hidden, they demand. The last fleet still answers to you. Call them home before it's too late. The acolyte spits blood, defiant. You're slaughtering the only ones who could have saved you. The prophecies were never about him. A glance at Kael, they were about the storm behind him. Another explosion, closer this time. The ceiling groans, raining shards of luminous crystal. The rebel leader hesitates just for a heartbeat, and that's all Kael needs. His shot takes them in the shoulder, spinning them around just as the western wall collapses in a hail of debris, not from more bombs, from something worse. The sky outside isn't sky anymore. It's a writhing, shifting mass of black tendrils lashing against some unseen barrier. The rebels freeze, the priests whisper prayers. And Kael, staring into that devouring dark, understands two things at once. The dissidents weren't lying, and whatever's coming doesn't care about prophecies, saviors, or the petty wars of mortals. The real threat isn't behind him anymore, it's here. The walls shudder as Kael descends not stairs, but something older, something that resonates beneath his boots like the spine of a slumbering beast. The tunnel carves deeper into the planet's crust, the air thickening with the scent of ozone and something metallic, like blood left to dry on ancient steel. The rebel's screams fade behind him, swallowed by the groans of the dying temple above. Only the Guardian's voice remains, echoing ahead in disjointed fragments, half a sentence in Galactic Common, the next in guttural Terran dialect. Proceed, claimant, the crucible awaits. The vault isn't a room, it's a wound, a cavernous space where the laws of physics twist like wet paper. Gravity tilts at odd angles, light bends around unseen corners, and at its center, suspended in a column of liquid shadow, floats the relic. Forged in no shape Kael recognizes, it pulses faintly, a heartbeat out of sync with his own. The Guardian manifests as a distortion in the air, a humanoid silhouette woven from static. Its voice grates like grinding tectonic plates. You seek the Arbiter. It has known many names: Peacemaker, World Ender, the final argument of kings. The static shifts, forming a hand that gestures to the relic. It answers only to the one foretold. Speak your truth, Terran, and the weapon will judge you. Kael's pulse hammers in his throat. The thing in the shadow doesn't look like a weapon. It looks alive, hungry. What's the catch? The Guardian's laugh is the sound of glass shattering in reverse. The Arbiter does not destroy, it reveals. It shows a species its own reflection, every sin, every hidden violence, every unspoken regret. Most civilizations tear themselves apart rather than face it. A tremor rocks the cavern, dust cascades from the ceiling. Somewhere above, the sky is fracturing. Kael steps forward. And if I'm not your savior? Then your mind burns with the rest. The relic's surface ripples as he reaches out. Not metal, not stone, something between flesh and fog. The moment his fingers brush it, the world dissolves and he's drowning in memories not his own. 1,000 wars condensed into singular instants. A Zorathian child sobbing over a corpse in a ruined street, a Vexar fleet glassing a planet to ash, a Terran soldier pressing a gun to his own comrade's head during the siege of Mars. The weight of it should crush him, but beneath the horror something else thrums, an undercurrent of defiance, of hands rebuilding what was broken, of treaties signed in blood but honored in peace. The relic shudders, the Guardian's static flickers wildly. Impossible, you do not resist the vision. Kael's voice comes out raw. I don't have to, I already live with this every day. A silence, then the column of shadow collapses, the relic slamming into his palm with the weight of a neutron star. The Guardian's form distorts further, its tone shifting, not reverent, not mocking. Almost relieved, the weapon has chosen. Now, Terran, comes the true test. Will you wield it, or will it wield you? Above them, the ceiling cracks open. Through the rift, the void stares back, and something in it stares down. The air in the docking bay is thick with the acrid scent of ionized metal and spilled coolant as Kael braces against the shuddering hull of the stolen frigate. One hand grips the arbiter, its alien metal humming against his palm like a living thing. The other clutches the torn edge of a star chart, the only clue to the Accord's last stronghold before the sky tore open. Behind him, the Ilthari scholar works the nav console with quiet precision, her delicate fingers dancing across holographic controls. She's been his shadow since the trial by fire, her wisdom a lifeline in the chaos. Until now, the first tremor is subtle, a flicker in the readouts, a half-second delay in her response when he asks for a status update. Then comes the soft, rhythmic pulse of a subdermal transmitter activating. Kael's battle-honed instincts scream before his mind catches up. He turns just as she steps back from the console, her bioluminescent markings flaring a sickly crimson. "I'm sorry," she whispers, and the grief in her voice is so raw it stops him cold. Her hands tremble as she lifts them, revealing the beacon embedded in her wrist, its light synchronized to the fleet now warping into the system. "They took them, my hatchlings, my mate," her voice fractures. "The Accord knew your path before you did, Kael. They've been pruning possibilities for millennia." Outside the viewport, the stars distort as a dozen warships rip through reality's fabric. Vexar dreadnoughts, Zorathian interceptors, even a Celestian battleship, its hull scarred from the coup. All converging on his signal, Kael doesn't raise the arbiter, doesn't curse. He watches a single luminous tear trace down her chitinous cheek and understands the true shape of the trap. The Accord never needed to kill him, they just needed him to hesitate. The scholar sags against the console, her strength spent. "Run," she pleads, but the engines are already dead. The comms jammed, and as the first boarding clamps lock onto the hull with a sound like tomb doors sealing, Kael does the one thing no prophecy predicted. He laughs. A ragged, wild sound, because the universe has finally shown its hand. The game was rigged from the start. Now it's time to flip the table. The sky splits like rotten fruit when the Vexar Armada emerges from warp. First comes the light blinding, searing, followed by the thunder of orbital cannons pounding the planetary shields. The ground shudders beneath Kael's boots as the defense grid flickers, overload emitters spewing molten debris onto the streets below. Civilians scramble for cover, their screams swallowed by the rising whine of descending drop pods. This isn't war, it's extermination. A hand clutches his arm. The young Zorathian soldier's carapace is cracked along one side, leaking iridescent fluid, their triple-jointed fingers trembling. Can we really win? Their voice is too small for the apocalypse unfolding above them. Kael doesn't look away from the firestorm. He checks his rifle's charge cell with a practiced twist, the weapon humming to life in his grip. We don't have a choice. The truth tastes like gunpowder. The Accord's fleet isn't here to negotiate. They've come to erase this planet, its people, every trace of the heresy that dared suggest a Terran could unite the stars. But Kael spent a lifetime defying impossible odds. He barks orders into the comms, rallying scattered militia units, rogue warships, even the ragged remains of the Temple Guard. They're not an army, they're a last stand. The first drop pod impacts 50 meters away, its spiked hull carving a crater into the plaza. Vexar shock troops emerge in a haze of smoke, their insectoid forms silhouetted against the flames, plasma rifles sweeping for targets. Kael doesn't wait for them to fire. His opening shot takes the lead soldier through the throat, the superheated round reducing its head to chitinous shrapnel. Chaos erupts. Militia snipers pick off stragglers from rooftops while ragtag mech suits salvaged mining rigs welded with stolen alien tech wade into the fray. A Celestian defector hurls gravity grenades that fold entire squads into pulsing singularities. And through it all, Kael moves like a storm front, the Arbiter strapped to his back, a silent promise of worse to come. The young soldier fights beside him, their initial fear hardening into something sharper. They see it now, how the Vexar advance stutters when a Terran grenade detonates at their flank, how the enemy commanders hesitate just a second too long when Kael's voice cracks across their comms. The message is simple, unmistakable. You wanted a savior, you're looking at him, and he's just getting started. The battlefield falls unnaturally silent as the Vexar warlord strides forward, his armored carapace clicking with each step, the air around him shimmering from the heat of his plasma gauntlets. His mandibles spread in a mockery of a smile as he surveys Kael smaller, unarmored, standing his ground with nothing but the Arbiter humming at his back and a battered rifle in his hands. You bleed like any animal, the warlord snarls, his voice vibrating through the rubble at their feet. He flexes his claws, each one tipped with enough toxin to drop a Terran in seconds. Your blood will prove the prophecies false. Kael doesn't flinch. He's seen enough tyrants to know their tells, the way their eyes flicker when they're lying, the way their voices waver just before the killing blow. This one's no different. Then why, he asks, rolling his shoulders loose, are you so afraid to fight me? The warlord moves like lightning. 1 second he's 6 paces away, the next his fist is carving through the space where Kael's head was. But Kael's already spinning low, the butt of his rifle cracking against the warlord's knee joint. The chitin holds barely, and the counterstrike sends Kael skidding back, his boots digging trenches in the dirt. They circle. The warlord's fighting style is brutal, efficient, every motion refined by centuries of conquest. But Kael, he fights like a man who's spent his life outmatched. He ducks where a trained soldier would parry. He feints when a warrior would stand firm. And when the warlord overextends, Kael does the one thing no Vexar expects. He closes the distance, driving his knife up into the gap beneath the warlord's arm. Blue ichor sprays, the warlord roars, backhanding Kael hard enough to send him sprawling, but the damage is done. The crowd of onlookers, rebels, militia, even a few defecting Accord soldiers erupt in shouts. Their warlord can bleed. You're not a savior, the warlord hisses, pressing a claw to his wound. You're a mistake. Kael wipes blood from his lip, grinning. Funny, I was gonna say the same about you. The second clash is shorter, deadlier. The warlord's arrogance makes him predictable, and Kael spent a lifetime exploiting pride. When the killing blow comes, it's not from the Arbiter's cosmic judgment, not from some divine intervention. It's a single plasma round to the warlord's throat, point blank as he's mid-gloat. The body hits the dirt with a thud, silence stretches, then from the edges of the battlefield, a sound Kael never thought he'd hear, the Vexar shock troops lowering their weapons. Not in surrender, in recognition, one steps forward, her carapace still streaked with ash from the bombardment. She doesn't bow, doesn't kneel, just meets Kael's eyes and rasps 2 words that change everything. Now what? The explosion blooms across the horizon like a second sunrise, painting the battlefield in hues of violet and gold. One moment, the Vexar fleet hangs in orbit, a noose of warships tightening around the planet. The next, their scrap metal and screams, torn apart by a shockwave that rips through the void with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Kael barely registers the heat searing his face. He's too focused on the Ilthari scholar crumpling to her knees, her hands fused to the Arbiter's surface, her luminous skin cracking like porcelain under the strain of channeling its power. She doesn't scream, doesn't beg. When she lifts her head, her eyes are twin supernova, burning through the last of her life force to fuel the relic's final command. The air around her warps, carrying her voice to every comm channel, every sensor array, every soul still breathing in the system. Look upon your savior, she whispers, and the words aren't just sound. They're a data burst, an echo, a truth hammered into the bones of the galaxy. Footage floods the networks, Kael standing bloodied but unbroken against the warlord, the Arbiter's light weaving through his scars like a coronation. Then she turns to him, and for the first time there's no grief in her gaze, just resolve. "They will follow you now," she murmurs, her fingers blackening as the relic drinks her dry. "Not because the prophecies demand it, because you showed them something worse than war." A shudder runs through her, the last of her bioluminescence guttering like a candle in the wind. The galaxy must see you rise. Her body dissolves before it hits the ground, reduced to ash and static. The Arbiter clatters onto the stone, inert once more. And above them, the remnants of the Vexar Armada spiral into the atmosphere, trailing fire like falling stars. Silence, then a sound Kael's never heard on any battlefield, not applause, not cheers, but something deeper. The scrape of carapace against stone as Vexar soldiers lower their weapons. The hiss of Zorathian breathing masks deactivating. The whisper of 100 species realizing all at once that the war they've been fighting isn't the one that matters anymore. A child, small, furred, with too many eyes, steps forward, clutching a piece of shrapnel like an offering, not to Kael, to the space where the scholars stood. The gesture cracks something open in the crowd, a dam breaking as others move forward, laying down blades, stripping insignia from armor, kneeling not in submission but in something far more dangerous, belief. Kael picks up the Arbiter. It's warm, not with the heat of destruction, with the echo of a hand that held it last. The chamber reeks of scorched metal and spilled ichor, the air thick with the static of dying machines and the weight of grudges too old to name. The surviving members of the Celestian Accord stand in fractured rings around the central dais, their postures rigid, their gazes cutting the space between them like knives. Kael watches them from the platform, the Arbiter cold against his back, the scholar's ashes still clinging to his boots. They're not here to crown him. They're here to bargain with a truth they can't unsee. A Zorathian elder steps forward first, her voice brittle as ancient parchment. "The prophecies spoke of unity," she declares. "Yet you bring only ruin." Her words are meant to sting, but Kael's heard worse from better liars. He doesn't flinch. A Vexar admiral, his carapace still smeared with the soot of his burning fleet, grinds his mandibles. "You destroyed an armada to prove a point. That doesn't make you a leader, it makes you a weapon." Kael exhales, slow, funny. "I was just thinking the same about you." The Admiral stiffens, but Kael's already turning to the others, the ones still clutching their wounds, their pride, their fury. "You want to debate fate." He shrugs, the motion loosening dried blood from his sleeve. "Fine, but while you're talking, the real enemy's chewing through the edges of known space. That storm outside your window, it's not a natural phenomenon, it's hungry." A murmur ripples through the assembly, some scoff. Others glance at the cracked viewports where the nebula's corpse light pulses erratically, as if something behind it is testing the glass. Then from the shadows, a voice like grinding gears. Prophecies can be broken. A figure steps into the light, taller than the rest, their features obscured by a hood of shimmering void fabric. Just like men, their fingers twitch and the temperature in the chamber plummets. Frost spiders across the floor, creeping toward the dais. Kael doesn't reach for the Arbiter. Doesn't blink. "You're right," he agrees, so casually the figure hesitates. "But here's the thing about breaking things." He lifts his chin, meeting the void where their eyes should be. "You gotta be strong enough to put them back together." Silence. Then, from the back of the chamber, a sound no one expected. Laughter. A grizzled Terran spacer, his uniform patched with a dozen faction insignias, shakes his head. "Damn, and here I thought this was gonna be another boring summit." He cracks his knuckles, grinning. "So, who's ready to save the damn galaxy?" The tension doesn't shatter. It shifts, like tectonic plates realigning, like a knife turning in its sheath. The Accord's leaders exchange glances. The shadowy figure melts back into the dark. And Kael, he just smirks. The game's changed, and for the first time he's holding the dice. The bunker is colder than the void itself, a place where shadows cling to the walls like starving things, and the air tastes of ozone and old blood. Kael expected a throne room, a war council, maybe even a temple of ancient horrors. But this is just a steel box buried beneath a dead world. Its only occupants a ring of figures seated around a scarred obsidian table. No armor, no insignia, only 12 faces, some scaled, some chitinous, one disturbingly human, watching him with the same amused detachment as a scientist observing a lab rat. At the head of the table, a figure leans forward, their features shifting like smoke under a broken hologram. "We wondered when you'd find us," they murmur, voice smooth as poisoned wine. "Though we never doubted you would." Kael's finger twitches against the Arbiter's grip. These aren't warlords or revolutionaries, they're something worse. The hands tugging every string, the architects of every war, famine, and shattered prophecy. The realization hits him like a plasma round to the chest. The Accord was never the real power, just another puppet. The shifting figure chuckles, their form solidifying for a heartbeat into something almost Terran before dissolving again. "You've been chasing ghosts, Kael Mercer. The prophecies, the trials, even your precious arbiter, all part of the script." They tap the table, and the surface lights up with star maps, each glowing node marking a civilization that rose and fell at their whim. "We let you play savior because chaos is the best fertilizer for control." One of the others, a Zorathian with eyes like frosted glass, exhales a plume of icy vapor. "The storm beyond the rim, our creation, the dying nebula, a containment field." Their claws trace a pattern in the air, and Kael's stomach twists as he recognizes the fractal, an exact match for the scars on every victim of the Arbiter's judgment. But it's the last speaker who makes his blood freeze. A child barely 8, her hair in braids, her smile too wide. "You were never the hero," she sings songs, swinging her legs under the chair. "Just the scarecrow to keep the birds fighting while we plowed the field." The leader stands, their form finally settling into something fixed, a face Kael's seen in 1,000 nightmares. His own, "Welcome to the end game" trigger. The air in the archive is thick with the scent of crumbling parchment and ozone, the walls lined with holographic scrolls that flicker like dying fireflies. Kael's fingers trace the jagged glyphs of the final prophecy, each symbol searing itself into his vision like a brand. It's not written in the flowing script of the Zorathian seers or the angular battle cant of the Vexar. This is older, darker, the language of whatever beings existed before the stars had names. The translation comes in fragments, whispered by the dying terminal at his elbow. "The Savior's blood shall water the roots of the second dawn. The cycle resets only when the Arbiter's light is extinguished." The words coil around his ribs like a vice. He's heard variations of this before, martyrdom myths, sacrificial saviors, but this isn't poetry. It's a blueprint, and the architects of this cosmic game have left their signature all over it. A shadow shifts in the corner, the child from the bunker, her braids swaying as she hops onto a nearby console. "They built you to break, you know," she says, swinging her legs. Like a fuse in a circuit, too much truth and pop. She mimics an explosion with her hands, giggling, "But you're smarter than the others, you know now." Kael's grip tightens on the Arbiter. The relic thrums against his palm, not with power, but with something worse, recognition. It's been waiting for this moment. Maybe that's why it chose him, not because he was worthy, but because he was broken enough to see the trap. The so-called prophecies were never about salvation. They were a failsafe, a way to cull civilizations before they grew too strong, too curious. A shudder runs through the archive as the terminal sputters its last, the holograms dissolving into static. The child vanishes with a wink, but her final words linger like a curse. Tick-tock, trigger, the storm's hungry. Outside, the sky darkens not with clouds, but with something vast and shapeless pressing against the fabric of reality. Kael exhales, rolling the truth over his tongue like old whiskey. They want him to die, fine, but if he's going out, he's taking the whole damn game with him. The ceremonial site hums with a sound like teeth grinding against bone, the air thick with the stink of burnt incense and something darker copper and ozone, the scent of old sacrifices. The ground beneath Kael's boots isn't stone, it's some kind of living membrane pulsing underfoot like a heartbeat. The cabal's figures stand in a perfect ring around him, their robes pooling in the dim light like spilled ink, their faces hidden behind masks of polished void stuff. They chant in a language that makes his teeth ache, syllables warping the air like heat haze. Energy coils around him like a serpent, tendrils of blue-black light cinching tighter with every breath. He can feel it leaching into his veins, cold and greedy, sapping strength from his limbs. The leader taller than the others, their mask carved into the likeness of a weeping god, extends a hand. The cycle demands a fulcrum, they intone, a sacrifice to reset the balance. Their voice is wrong, layered with whispers that don't match their lips. Kael's knees hit the membrane. The energy is crushing now, pressing down like a boot on his spine. But there's a flicker in his chest, something hot and stubborn flaring against the cold. A memory surfaces not of battle, not of prophecy, but of a rain-slick alley on Earth, a knife in his gut, and the way he'd laughed through the blood because the bastard who stabbed him hadn't checked for a second blade. The cabal's chanting rises to a crescendo. The energy surges, ready to tear him apart molecule by molecule. That's when Kael grins, slow and feral, and meets the leader's hollow eyes. "You forgot one thing," he rasps, and his voice doesn't sound human anymore. It sounds like a reactor core going critical. Terrans don't die easy. Then he does the one thing no one expects. He stops fighting the energy. He pulls it in, the backlash cracks the sky open. The cabal's perfect circle shatters as the stolen power rips back through them, their masks exploding into shrapnel, their robes igniting like paper. The ground heaves, the membrane splitting to reveal something old and hungry beneath something that doesn't like being woken early. Kael doesn't wait to see what happens next. He's already moving, the arbiter howling in his grip, its light no longer blue but a searing, impossible gold. The cabal wanted a sacrifice. They're about to learn what happens when you try to burn a man who's made of fire. The battlefield churns with the kind of chaos that rewrites history. 1,000 species, 100 blood feuds, all momentarily forgotten as the first wave crashes into the Accord's barricades. Kael doesn't lead from the rear. He wades into the fray, the arbiter's light cutting through smokescreen and shadow alike, illuminating faces once sworn to mutual annihilation. A Vexar shock trooper locks eyes with a Zorathian temple guard across the corpse of an Accord drone, and for the first time in centuries they nod. Near the ruins of a shattered grav cannon, a grizzled Ilthari mercenary, his carapace dented from a dozen wars, plants his banner in the blood-soaked earth. The fabric is a patchwork of torn insignias, the symbols of a dozen enemy factions stitched together into something new. His roar tears through the din, raw and triumphant. For the first time in eternity, we fight together. The cry spreads like wildfire. A Celestian defector echoes it, her wings flaring as she hurls a pulse grenade into an artillery nest. A Terran spacer, his ship's hull plastered with the crossed-out sigils of dead empires, bellows it through a busted comms unit. Even the Void Stalkers pale. Many-limbed horrors who have lurked in the dark for generations take up the chant in their clicking, bone-dry tongues. Kael watches the tide turn, not with the precision of a general's strategy, but with the messy, brutal beauty of a dam breaking. The Accord's lines buckle under the weight of something they never accounted for: unity. Not the hollow kind from treaties or prophecies, but the kind forged in the heat of shared defiance. A Vexar drops a med kit at a wounded Zorathian side. A human sniper covers a retreating squad of Ilthari younglings. And then, the moment that seals it all, an Accord lieutenant, his armor gleaming with the arrogance of invincibility, strides forward to demand surrender. The grizzled Ilthari merc steps up, grinning. "You don't get it, do you?" He jerks a thumb at the seething mass of rebels behind him. "We're not an army. We're a reckoning. The lieutenant's last mistake is looking to Kael for confirmation. The Arbiter's light doesn't burn him. It unravels him thread by thread until all that's left is the truth echoing across the battlefield. Some chains can't be reforged. They can only be shattered. The air above the stronghold shimmers like a mirage, warped by the Cabal's last-ditch energy shield. Kael's boots sink into ash as he charges forward, the Arbiter's glow cutting through the haze like a beacon. Around him, the Allied ranks waver laser fire sears through a Vexar vanguard, their carapaces splitting like overcooked husks, while Celestian wings crumple under artillery barrages from the stronghold's turrets. The ground is a graveyard in the making, littered with smoldering craters and the twisted remains of those who didn't move fast enough. Keep moving. Kael's voice rasps over the comms, raw from smoke and command. He doesn't glance back at the fallen. There's no time. Every second the Cabal's shield holds is another second they can siphon power from the dying star overhead, another second closer to their endgame. This ends today. A Zorathian skirmisher stumbles beside him, her mask cracked, her breath ragged. "We're not breaking through," she hisses, gesturing to the shield's pulsing core. Their text too. Kael doesn't let her finish. He grabs her shoulder, shoves a grenade into her grip, and points to a fissure in the shield's lattice, a flickering weak spot where the energy wavers. "Then we don't break it, we bend it." The skirmisher hesitates for half a heartbeat. Then she's sprinting, weaving through gunfire, her squad covering her with a hailstorm of plasma bolts. Kael watches as she leaps, as the grenade detonates against the fissure, as the shield groans like a living thing in pain. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the shield fractures. The backlash is instant. Energy arcs whip outward, lashing at friend and foe alike. The stronghold spires shudder, their obsidian surfaces spiderwebbing with cracks. And from within, a sound echoes, not the Cabal's chanting, not the roar of engines, but something far worse, the sharp, metallic scream of a failsafe triggering. Kael's blood runs cold. The Cabal isn't defending their stronghold, they're rigging it to collapse. The ground lurches beneath him as the first spire implodes, swallowing a squad of Ilthari commandos whole. Debris rains like shrapnel, and through the chaos, Kael sees it. The Cabal's inner circle retreating into a shimmering portal, their leader turning just long enough to meet his gaze. Not in defiance, in pity. "Forward!" Kael roars, lunging through the collapsing ruins. The Arbiter thunders in his grip, its light now a searing white, scorching the air where it passes. He doesn't know if the others are still behind him, doesn't care. The Cabal wanted a sacrifice, they'll get one, but not the one they planned. The broadcast pulses through the galaxy like a shockwave, ripping across every comms network, every public screen, every handheld device from the glittering core worlds to the farthest mining outpost. The footage is raw, unfiltered, no propaganda edits, no smoothing of edges, just the Cabal's own recordings playing back at them like a knife to the throat. Experiments on entire populations, wars engineered like lab experiments, the systematic pruning of civilizations that dared to reach too far, dream too loud. And at the center of it all, the truth that chokes the breath from a million throats. The prophecies were never divine. They were a script, a leash. A news anchor on Sigma Prime's most watched channel stares into the cam, his usually polished veneer cracked open by disbelief. His lips move soundlessly for a full 3 seconds before his voice finally stutters to life. Though the people are demanding justice, what now? The silence that follows isn't the quiet of confusion, it's the electric hush before a storm breaks. On the streets of a dozen worlds, the reaction is instantaneous. A Vexar laborer smashes his overseer's data pad, the screen still glowing with images of his ancestors being herded into breeding pens. A Zorathian priestess tears the sacred scrolls from her temple's walls, her wail of betrayal echoing through vaulted halls. Even the Accord's enforcers hesitate, their rifles lowering as the footage loops, showing their own commanders signing the orders to gas a pacifist colony on the brink of peace. Kael watches the chaos unfold from a stolen command hub, the Arbiter's light dimmed to a steady pulse against his back. This isn't victory, not yet. It's the spark thrown into a powder keg the Cabal spent millennia stacking. The comms crackle with overlapping screams, mobs storming government complexes, warships turning their guns on former allies, entire systems going dark as their leaders flee into the void. Then, cutting through the noise, a single transmission, a child's voice, trembling but clear, broadcast from some half-forgotten colony on the edge of known space. "They lied to us," she whispers, "about everything." The simplicity of it guts him. The screen flickers one last time before the hub's systems overload, but not before Kael catches the final image, a crowd of mixed species, their hands linked, their faces lit by the flames of burning Cabal banners. No flags, no factions, just the unshakable understanding that the galaxy's true enemy was never the Terrans or the Vexar or any of the others they'd been taught to fear. It was the ones who made them afraid in the first place. The explosion lights up the sky like a dying star, a fireball so bright it sears the oxygen from the air, leaving behind only the acrid stench of vaporized metal and the echoing silence that follows absolute destruction. From the smoldering wreckage of what was once Kael's command shuttle, the Cabal's observers watch through their scrying screens, their satisfaction palpable. The Terran thorn in their side finally removed, but in the shadows of the debris field something flickers, a distortion in the light, a glitch in the feed. Then, all at once, every display in the Cabal's sanctum erupts with the same image, Kael's face, battered but grinning, his holographic form leaning in as if sharing a private joke. "You wanted a martyr." His voice is a razor wrapped in velvet, slicing through their triumph. "Here I am." The reaction is instant. The Cabal's leader snarls, shattering a console with one clawed hand, but it's too late. The trap is already sprung. Kael's death was the trigger, the final piece needed to unlock the Cabal's most guarded systems. As the holo disperses, it leaves behind something far more dangerous: proof. Every encrypted file, every hidden directive, every whispered order the Cabal ever gave spills into the open, flooding the galactic networks like a dam bursting. Tech priests on a dozen worlds jerk back from their terminals as classified manifests blink to life, detailing horrors even they couldn't imagine, battle plans against unarmed colonies. Timelines for engineered famines, the cold, clinical notes on how best to fracture alliances before they could form, and beneath it all, the real prize: coordinates. The Cabal's true stronghold, hidden behind layers of illusion, now laid bare. Kael's voice echoes once more, this time from every speaker in the sanctum. "You spent centuries playing gods," he murmurs, the words laced with something darker than anger. "But gods don't bleed." The feed cuts to live footage of the Cabal's own enforcers turning on their masters, their loyalty shattered by the truth. Somewhere in the wreckage of his own making, the real Kael Mercer watches the chaos unfold, his fingers tightening around the Arbiter. The Cabal's end game wasn't control. It was extinction, and now, thanks to their own arrogance, the entire galaxy knows it. The riots begin at dawn, not with battle cries but with silence. A hush so deep it swallows the usual hum of the capital's gravity engines, the chatter of markets, even the distant wail of patrol drones. Then, like a single breath held too long, the dam breaks. A Zorathian dockworker hurls her cargo loader through the gates of the Cabal's treasury. A Vexar scholar smashes the data core containing his people's approved history. A Terran child, no older than 6, scrawls liars in bright red paint across a propaganda hologram twice her height. The wave builds fast, too fast for the Cabal's enforcers to contain, because this isn't just anger. It's revelation. Kael watches from a crumbling balcony as the city burns, not with destruction's chaos, but with the terrible clarity of a fever breaking. The Arbiter hangs heavy at his side, its light dimmed now, its purpose fulfilled. He doesn't need to raise it. The people don't need a beacon anymore. They've found their own fire, a tug at his sleeve. He glances down to see a small Ilthari girl, her bioluminescent spots flickering with exhaustion, her claws still stained from tearing down cabal banners. "Are you really the savior?" she asks, voice thin but steady. The question lingers between them, unspoken history hanging in the air, the prophecies, the wars, the weight of galaxies on one man's shoulders. Kael crouches until they're eye level, the ghost of an old battlefield smirk playing at his lips. "No," he says, and the word feels like shedding armor. He nods to the streets below, where a dozen species are prying open cabal vaults, not for loot, but for the truth inside. "You all are." The girl considers this, then picks up a fallen enforcer's helmet, turning it over in her hands. When she looks up again, her spots blaze defiant gold. "Good," she declares, and flings the helmet over the railing. It arcs through the smoke-choked air, spinning end over end before vanishing into the roaring crowd below. Somewhere in the distance, a monument topples not with a crash, but with a sigh, like the universe itself exhaling. The Cabal's era is over. The next one belongs to whoever's brave enough to build it. And judging by the sounds rising from the streets, the hammering of new foundations, the singing in a dozen tongues, the laughter of children who have never known anything but lies, that future's already being written. The chamber is too quiet, the air thick with the weight of unspoken expectations. The high vaulted ceiling, carved with the history of 1,000 empires, watches silently as Kael stares at the throne. A twisted spire of black crystal and starlight, pulsing with the kind of power most species would wage wars to possess. The assembled delegates shift, their scales, carapaces, and synthetic skins glinting in the dim light, waiting for the savior to ascend. Instead, Kael steps back. A ripple of shock runs through the crowd. The Zorathian high priest, his mask cracked from the final battle, stiffens. "This is your right," he insists, voice brittle with confusion. "The prophecies foretold." "Yeah, about that." Kael rubs his neck, the motion casual, like he's discussing bad weather instead of rewriting galactic history. "Prophecies are crap." Silence, then murmurs, sharp and disbelieving. A Vexar warlord, his mandibles flexing, steps forward. "You would refuse dominion over the Accord's remnants." "After all we've bled for." Kael's grin is sharp, tired. "Exactly because of what we've bled for." He gestures to the fractured viewports, where the first raw glow of a rebuilding world flickers. "You want another tyrant, another cycle of some chosen one holding the leash. Fine, but it won't be me." The Ilthari scholar, her bioluminescence still dimmed from the wounds she took shielding civilians, tilts her head. "Then what do you propose?" "Something scarier." Kael shrugs. "You figure it out together." For a moment, no one moves. Then, from the back of the chamber, a sound like splintering ice, the Zorathian priest's quiet, breathless laugh. "Of course," he murmurs, nodding as if unraveling a riddle. "The Arbiter never crowned kings, it exposed lies." His gaze lifts, ancient and weary, and for the first time hopeful. "Perhaps we misunderstood. The Savior wasn't meant to rule, he was meant to remind us we could." The words hang, fragile, in the air. A Terran spacer, her arms slung over a Vexar's chitinous shoulder, whistles. "Damn, so we're doing this the hard way." Kael snorts, turning toward the exit. Only way that lasts. And as the chamber erupts into debates, accords, and the messy, beautiful chaos of self-determination, he doesn't look back. The throne remains empty. Outside, the first dawn of a new era breaks not with a fanfare, but with the sound of 100 voices arguing over what comes next. The observation deck is silent except for the hum of the atmospheric stabilizers. The vast panorama of the orbital docking rings stretching below like a glittering necklace around Terra's blue-green throat. Kael leans against the viewport, his reflection a ghost superimposed over the bustling ships, freighters from Vexar mining guilds, Zorathian research vessels, even a Celestrian pleasure yacht, their hulls emblazoned with the new sigil of the Galactic Compact. Behind him, the soft chime of footsteps, a young diplomat, her crisp uniform still bearing the creases of its first wearing, hesitates before stepping forward. Ambassador Mercer, she fumbles with her datapad, then blurts, "How did you do it?" Kael doesn't turn. He watches a Terran pilot, barely older than the girl beside him, laughing with a Ilthari navigator as they unload crates marked with the intertwined symbols of their homeworlds. The scars on his knuckles ache, an old reminder of bar fights and battlefields. "You're asking the wrong question." His voice is rougher than it used to be, worn thin by years of speeches and smoke. "It wasn't about what I did, it was about what we stopped doing." The diplomat frowns. "The histories say you broke the prophecies, that you prophecies are just excuses." He finally faces her, nodding at the viewport. "Look at them. The Vexar think we're reckless, the Zorathians think we're sentimental, and the Terrans." He chuckles, a dry sound. "We're just stubborn, but out there none of that matters, because every time someone tried to force us into their grand design, we dug in our heels and said no." She opens her mouth, then shuts it, watching as a group of children, half Terran, half Zenthari, chase each other past a food vendor's stall, their laughter echoing through the comms channel. "So that's the secret, defiance." Kael exhales, the glass fogging briefly under his breath. "Defiance is just the start. The real work happens after, when you have to figure out how to build something better." He taps the viewport where the first joint colony ship, its hull painted with overlapping constellations, drifts toward the jump gate. "They spent millennia telling us we were too young, too fractured, too human to matter. But that's the thing about being the underdog, you learn to fight with everything you've got, even when all you've got is your spine." The diplomat stares at the departing ship, her fingers tightening around the datapad. "And if they'd never listened, if the Accord had won, for the first time," Kael smiles, "an old knowing thing, then we'd still be fighting." Below, the jump gate flares to life, its light painting the deck in streaks of gold. Somewhere beyond it, 1,000 worlds wait, their futures no longer written in someone else's stars. The last embers of the victory celebrations flicker against the observation deck's viewport, casting Kael's scarred silhouette against the stars. Below, the planet world cities stitching themselves back together with salvaged steel and stubborn hope, their lights brighter now without the shadow of the cabal pressing down. A glass of something strong and Terran brewed sits untouched in his grip, the condensation pooling against old calluses. He doesn't drink, just watches. The comms crackle behind him, snippets of chatter from 100 worlds bleeding together, trade agreements hammered out over shared scars, children singing in languages once banned, a Zorathian poet reciting verses about the day the chains turned to dust. History is being rewritten in real time, not by emperors or prophets, but by dockworkers and farmers and engineers who looked at the lie they'd been sold and said enough. A familiar presence settles beside him, the Ilthari scholar, her bioluminescence still faint from the wound she took in the final push. She doesn't speak at first, just follows his gaze to the knotted belt of the Milky Way, where the first joint colony ships are already charting courses to systems that were once forbidden. "You could go with them," she murmurs. "They'd name a star after you, build statues." Kael's laugh is a rough thing, worn at the edges. "Statues are for dead men." He tilts his head toward the viewport, where a cluster of young cadets, Terran, Vexar, Celestian, jostle each other by a navigation console, their laughter sharp and unburdened. "Let them have the stars, they'll do better with them anyway." The scholar studies him, her eyes reflecting the cosmos. "And what will you do?" For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders feels lighter. "Not gone, just different, same as always," he says, pushing off the viewport. "Keep walking." As the door hisses shut behind him, the stars wheel on, indifferent to prophecies and saviors. But somewhere in the dark, a child picks up a fallen banner, stitches it into a sail, and points her ship toward the unknown. The real work, it turns out, was never about one man's war. It was about what came after.